In the hush of a foggy autumn evening in 1933, the conservatory garden of Central Park lay shrouded in mist, its ornate fountains whispering secrets to the encroaching dusk. Golden leaves clung desperately to the branches, as if unwilling to surrender to the chill. It was here, amid the blooming chrysanthemums and wrought-iron gates, that Inspector Reginald Mallory's body was discovered, slumped against a marble bench, his face contorted in eternal surprise, a single crimson rose clutched in his rigid hand. No wound marred his form, yet death had claimed him swiftly. Whispers of poison rippled through the gathering crowd. Who had orchestrated this silent demise in New York's verdant sanctuary? The enigma beckoned, promising revelations as intricate as the garden's labyrinthine paths. Chapter 1. The Summons to the New World. The SS Normandy cut through the Atlantic like a silver blade, its decks humming with the anticipation of passengers bound for the New World. It was October 1933, and the fog that clung to the ocean seemed to mirror the uncertainty of the times. Prohibition's shadow still lingered, and whispers of economic recovery competed with tales of desperation. Hercule Poirot, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, his patent leather shoes gleaming, stood at the ship's rail, his small, fastidious hands adjusting his mustache. The sea air was brisk, but his mind was sharper, stirred by the urgent cable he had received in London from his old friend, Captain Arthur Hastings. "Mon ami," the cable had read, "a puzzle awaits in New York that demands your little gray cells. Inspector Reginald Mallory, dead in Central Park, poisoned, no clear clues. I implore you, come at once." Hastings, ever the loyal companion, had settled in America after a whirlwind romance, but his knack for stumbling into mysteries remained unchanged. Poirot, though loath to leave the comforts of his London flat, could not resist the call of an enigma, especially one involving poison, a method so intimate, so deliberate, it spoke of secrets buried deep. As the skyline of Manhattan emerged from the mist,
Tell me all. But first, let us find a place of civility. This pier, it is not conducive to the ordering of thoughts. They motored through the bustling streets of Manhattan, the clamor of horns and shouts, a stark contrast to London's restrained chaos. Hastings had arranged a suite at the Plaza Hotel, overlooking the verdant expanse of Central Park, where the crime had occurred. As they settled into the plush sitting room, a fire crackling in the hearth to ward off the autumn chill, Hastings began his tale. "Inspector Reginald Mallory," he said, pouring tea from a silver pot, "was a fine officer, 45 years old, originally from Scotland Yard. He transferred to the New York Police Department 3 years ago, brought in for his expertise in cracking complex cases. He was investigating a ring of art smugglers, paintings vanishing from private collections, replaced with forgeries. Last night, he was found dead in the conservatory garden, a secluded part of Central Park. Cause of death? Cyanide poisoning, mixed in his thermos of tea. No visible wounds, no struggle, just death." Poirot sipped his tea, his lips pursing at the bitter blend. "Cyanide, you say? A swift and silent killer. The thermos, his own, I presume?" "Yes," Hastings nodded. "He carried it often, took evening strolls in the garden to clear his mind. The police found it beside him, empty, but reeking of almonds. Only his fingerprints were on it." "And the scene?" Poirot pressed, leaning forward, his fingers steepled. "Describe it, if you please." Hastings closed his eyes, recalling the details. "The conservatory garden is a hidden gem. 3 sections, French, Italian, English, full of flowers and fountains. Mallory was slumped on a marble bench in the French section. near a fountain shaped like dancing maidens. A single crimson rose was clutched in his hand, as if placed there deliberately. The ground nearby had crushed petals, and the fog was thick, masking any footprints. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A rose, symbolic perhaps, love, betrayal, or a warning. And who are the players in this drama, Hastings? Every murder has its cast. Hastings leaned back, ticking off names.
He's slippery as an eel. And finally, Clara Mallory, the inspector's sister, arrived from Boston yesterday. She and Mallory had a falling out over his will. He cut her out, called her frivolous. She says she was on a train, but the timings are tight. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the armrest. A wife scorned, a subordinate slighted, a dealer cornered, and a sister spurned. Motives aplenty, but the truth hides in the details. We must visit this garden, Hastings. The scene of the crime speaks when men do not. They hailed a cab, the city blurring past in a kaleidoscope of yellow taxis and newsboys hawking papers. Central Park unfolded before them, its trees ablaze with autumn hues, gold, amber, crimson, yet shadowed by the encroaching dusk. The conservatory garden lay at the park's northern edge, a sanctuary of symmetry and elegance, its wrought iron gates gleaming faintly in the fog. As they approached the French section, cordoned off by police tape, Poirot's senses sharpened. The air carried the scent of damp earth and fading blooms, and the distant gurgle of the fountain underscored the silence. Detective Lieutenant O'Sullivan, a burly Irishman with a face like weathered granite, greeted them. "Mr. Poirot, your reputation's crossed the pond. We're stumped. No witnesses, no murder weapon beyond the thermos, and that rose. Odd, ain't it?" "Indeed," Poirot replied, crouching beside the bench where Mallory had met his end. The marble was cold, streaked with moss, and the surrounding flower beds bore faint signs of disturbance, crushed chrysanthemums, scattered petals. Poirot's gloved hand traced the ground, pausing at a single, pristine rose petal, its edges curling like a secret withheld. This rose, freshly cut, not wilted, plucked for a purpose. And the thermos? O'Sullivan produced it, sealed in an evidence bag. Labs analyzing it. Cyanide was mixed in the tea, but how it got there's a mystery. Mallory brewed his own, Earl Grey.
They gave chase, but the figure vanished into the labyrinthine paths, leaving only the echo of rustling leaves. Back at the bench, Poirot interviewed the first suspect, Evelyn Mallory, her face veiled in black lace, her eyes red from tears, or artifice. "Reggie was consumed by his work," she said, her voice trembling. "He grew distant, obsessed with those smugglers. We argued, yes, over finances. My family's money is gone, and he was frugal. But I was at bridge club. Ask my friends." Poirot noted the hesitation in her tone, the way her gloved hands twisted her handkerchief. "Madame, your alibi will be verified. And this rose, did your husband favor them?" She shook her head. "He cared nothing for flowers. It's unsettling." Next came Sergeant Drake, his broad shoulders tense, his jaw set. "Mallory was tough but fair," he said, avoiding Poirot's gaze. "Sure, I wanted that promotion. But murder? I was at the precinct, logging reports. Your log, Monsieur Drake. May I see it?" Poirot's tone was polite but piercing. Drake flushed, promising to provide it. As he left, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "He hides something, this one. His eyes betray him." The day waned, and Poirot lingered in the garden, the fog thickening like a curtain drawn across truth. He found a discarded glove near the fountain, monogrammed V.L. Victor Lang? A planted clue,
or a careless mistake? As they returned to the plaza, Hastings voiced his unease. This feels bigger than one man's death, Poirot. Smuggling, poison, shadows in the mist. What are we up against? Poirot smiled faintly, his mind a whirl of connections. A tapestry of deceit, mon ami. The rose, the thermos, the glove, they are threads. We shall weave them into truth. But first, we dine. The gray cells, they require nourishment. That night, as Poirot sipped a tisane in his suite, a note slipped under the door. Leave the garden alone, detective, or share Mallory's fate. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, and unsigned. Poirot's lips curved. The game, Hastings.
Ami, Poirot said to Hastings, his voice low but resonant. This garden, it is a stage. The players have performed their tragedy, and we must uncover the script. The rose, the thermos, the absence of struggle, these are not accidents. They are deliberate, like the brush strokes of an artist. Hastings nodded, though his brow furrowed with unease. It's eerie, Poirot. A man like Mallory, sharp as a tack, taken down without a fight. Someone knew his habits intimately. Précisément, Poirot replied, adjusting his Homburg hat. Intimacy breeds betrayal. Now, let us meet this Lieutenant O'Sullivan and see what the police have overlooked. Detective Lieutenant Patrick O'Sullivan awaited them at the cordoned-off bench, his burly frame dwarfing the delicate surroundings. His Irish brogue was thick, tinged with skepticism as he shook Poirot's hand. Mr. Poirot, heard you're the best in the business. Scotland Yard's finest, they say. But this case, it's a ghost. No witnesses, no weapon beyond that thermos. And that rose? Damned peculiar. Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching slightly. The peculiar, Lieutenant, is where truth hides. Show me the bench, if you please. The marble bench stood unassuming, its surface streaked with age and moss. Nearby, the fountain's maidens danced in eternal stillness, water gurgling softly. Poirot crouched, his gloved hands tracing the ground. Crushed chrysanthemum petals littered the earth, their vibrant yellow bruised by careless feet. These petals, he murmured, they were not here by chance. Someone stood close, perhaps watching, perhaps delivering death. O'Sullivan produced the thermos, still in its evidence bag. Lab confirmed cyanide in the tea residue. Bitter stuff, but Mallory drank it down. His fingerprints only, no others. He brewed it himself that morning. Earl Grey, no sugar, his usual. Poirot examined the thermos, noting the faint scratches on the silver lid, as if it had been opened with haste or unfamiliarity. No sugar, you say. Yet
Drake's at the precinct, Lang's at his gallery. Clara's staying at the Waldorf, arrived from Boston yesterday. The first interview was with Evelyn Mallory, conducted in the garden to recreate the scene's atmosphere. She arrived draped in black, her veil barely concealing eyes red from weeping, or so it seemed. Her delicate frame trembled as she sat on a nearby bench, her gloved hands clutching a lace handkerchief. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice a fragile whisper. "Reggie was my world, despite our quarrels. He was so consumed by his work, those smugglers, always those smugglers. We argued last week at the Vanderbilt Gala, yes, over money. My family's fortune is nearly gone, and Reggie was strict." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, though his tone was gentle. "Madame, this argument, it was public? And your whereabouts the night of his death?" "I was at my bridge club," Evelyn replied, dabbing her eyes. "Mrs. Astor and Mrs. Vanderbilt can confirm it. We played until late." Poirot noted the slight hesitation, the way her fingers tightened on the handkerchief. "And the rose, madame?" Did your husband have a fondness for such flowers? She shook her head, her veil fluttering. No, Reggie cared nothing for gardens. That rose, it frightens me. It's as if someone meant it as a message. Hastings leaned in, whispering to Poirot, "She's convincing, but those tears, too perfect, perhaps?" Poirot merely nodded, dismissing Evelyn with a polite bow. "We shall speak again, madame. My sympathies." Next came Sergeant Harlan Drake, summoned from the precinct. His broad shoulders filled his uniform, but his eyes darted nervously, avoiding Poirot's piercing stare. Inspector Mallory was a tough boss, Drake admitted, standing stiffly near the fountain. He passed me over for promotion, gave it to some rookie instead, said I lacked initiative. But murder? That's absurd. "Your whereabouts, Monsieur Drake?" Poirot said, his voice sharp. "The evening of the murder, where were you?" "At the precinct, logging reports," Drake replied, his jaw tightening.
Brooklyn when he died, dozens of witnesses.
Poirot held up the monogrammed glove found near the fountain. "This, Monsieur Lang, is it yours?" Lang's smile faltered, but he recovered quickly.
Lost it weeks ago. Anyone could have planted it. You're fishing, detective."
Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet the fish bites. Your auction, provide the details, if you please." Lang smirked, exhaling smoke.
"Check with Sotheby's. I bid on a Renoir. Won it, too."
As Lang sauntered away, Poirot turned to Hastings. "A man too confident, perhaps. The glove, the auction, we shall test his story." The interviews concluded. Poirot lingered in the garden, his cane tapping rhythmically as he paced the French section's paths. The fountain's gurgle seemed to mock the silence of the crime, and the crushed petals underfoot whispered of a presence now gone. "Hastings," Poirot said, pausing. "The thermos suggests intimacy, yes? Someone Mallory trusted. But the rose, its meaning eludes me. A lover? A foe? Or both?" Hastings scratched his head. "It's a queer detail, Poirot. And that shadow we saw last night. Someone's watching us." "Oui," Poirot agreed, his gaze sweeping the hedges. "The garden keeps its secrets, but not for long." They returned to the scene, Poirot's attention drawn to a faint scuff mark on the bench's base, barely visible. "A shoe, perhaps," he mused, sketching it in his notebook. "Narrow, elegant, not a man's. Madame Mallory, perhaps, or another?" O'Sullivan rejoined them, bringing news. "Got a lead on Clara Mallory, the sister. She's at the Waldorf, but her train tickets, fishy, arrived earlier than she claimed. Could have been in the city by 6 p.m. Poirot's eyes lit up. "A discrepancy. We must speak with Mademoiselle Clara. And the groundskeeper, Brennan, bring him too." Tom Brennan, a wiry man with soil-stained hands, met them near the English Garden's wild roses.
"I found the inspector slumped there," he said. "Pieces of the mosaic. We must arrange them correctly."
The afternoon waned, and Poirot arranged a meeting with Clara Mallory at the Waldorf. She was a striking woman, her auburn hair pinned elegantly, her eyes sharp with defiance. "Reggie and I had our differences," she admitted, sipping tea in the hotel's lounge. "He cut me from his will, called me a spendthrift. But I was on the train from Boston. Check the schedule." Poirot smiled thinly. "Mademoiselle, the train arrived at 5:45 p.m. You had time to reach the garden. And this earring, yours?" Clara paled, touching her ear. "I lost one yesterday, but I wasn't in the park." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "We shall see, mademoiselle." As they left the Waldorf, the sun dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across Central Park. Poirot and Hastings returned to the garden, drawn by an instinct Poirot could not yet articulate. The French section was quiet now, the police tape fluttering in the breeze. Poirot paused by the fountain, his eyes tracing the paths. "Hastings," he said softly. "The killer was here, close enough to touch. The thermos, the rose, they speak of someone who knew Mallory's heart." Suddenly, a rustle in the hedges broke the silence. A figure darted from the shadows, cloaked in a dark coat, vanishing into the Italian section's pergola. "After them!" Poirot cried. But the figure was swift, swallowed by the maze of vines and statues. Hastings gave chase but returned breathless, empty-handed. "Gone!" Hastings panted. "Like a ghost." Poirot's lips curved. "Not a ghost, mon ami. A person, desperate to hide. The garden watches, and we shall make it speak." That night back at the plaza, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, sketching connections. Evelyn's tears, Drake's evasions, Lang's arrogance, Clara's lies, the earring, the glove, the rose. The note from the previous night lay beside him. "Leave the garden alone." Someone feared his scrutiny. As he sipped his tisane,
monogrammed glove, the pearl earring, the scratched thermos lid, and the fleeting shadow in the garden all pointed to a killer who thrived on deception. Today, Poirot intended to confront one of the chief suspects, Victor Lang, in his own domain, the gilded world of art. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever at Poirot's side, adjusted his hat as they approached Lang's gallery, a sleek edifice of glass and marble on Fifth Avenue. "This Lang fellow," Hastings muttered, "he's slippery as an eel. Claims he was at an auction, but that glove with his initials. Too convenient, don't you think?" "Convenience, mon ami, is often a disguise for carelessness," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "Monsieur Lang wishes us to believe he is untouchable. We shall test his armor." Inside, the gallery was a cathedral of aesthetics, its walls adorned with canvases that whispered of wealth and secrets. Crystal chandeliers cast a soft glow over Renaissance portraits and modernist abstracts, their frames glinting with gold leaf. Victor Lang stood at the center, a tall, lean figure in a tailored pinstripe suit, his black hair slicked back, a cigarette dangling from his lips. He exuded the confidence of a man accustomed to bending others to his will. "Mr. Poirot," he drawled, exhaling a plume of smoke, "and Captain Hastings, to what do I owe the pleasure? Surely you don't suspect a respectable dealer in a policeman's death?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Respectability, Monsieur Lang, is a mask somewhere poorly. Inspector Mallory was investigating your business dealings. Smuggling, perhaps? Paintings vanishing, replaced with forgeries?" Lang's smile tightened, but his voice remained smooth. "Mallory was misguided. I deal in legitimate art, provenance papers, auctions, all above board. He hounded me for months, but I've nothing to hide. The night he died, I was at Sotheby's in Brooklyn, bidding on a Renoir. Won it, too. Dozens saw me." Poirot produced the monogrammed glove, holding it delicately between
Imprecise. A forgery, perhaps?
Lang laughed, a touch too loudly. "You're no art critic, Poirot. That's genuine, appraised by experts." "Experts can be persuaded," Poirot murmured, turning back to Lang. "We shall verify your alibi, monsieur. And this glove, it will tell its story." As they left the gallery, Hastings whispered, "Did you see his face when you mentioned the forgery?
He's hiding something, Poirot. Oui, Poirot agreed, his mind racing. The glove is a red herring, perhaps, but the painting. It connects to Mallory's investigation. We must dig deeper. Back at the Plaza Hotel, Poirot spread Mallory's case notes across the suite's mahogany table, the fire crackling in the hearth. The inspector's handwriting was meticulous, detailing a smuggling ring trafficking stolen art through New York's ports. Coded entries mentioned a rose betrayal, a phrase that echoed the crimson rose found in Mallory's hand. "This rose," Poirot said, tapping the notes, "it is no mere decoration. It is a signature, a message from the killer." Hastings frowned, sipping his tea. But who? Evelyn, his wife? She's got motive, money troubles, that public row. Or Drake, the sergeant, bitter over the promotion. Or Lang, protecting his empire, Poirot added. Or Clara, the sister, scorned by the will. But we lack the final piece, the how of the poison. A knock at the door announced Lieutenant O'Sullivan, his face grim. "Got news, Poirot. Lab results on the thermos. Cyanide was mixed with the tea, but there's a trace of sugar residue. Odd, since Mallory hated sweetened tea." Poirot's eyes lit up. Sugar! To mask the cyanide's bitterness. The killer knew his habits, but made a mistake. This narrows our field. O'Sullivan handed over a file. Also, we tracked Clara Mallory's train. She arrived at 5:45 p.m., plenty of time to reach the garden by 7 p.m., when Mallory was last seen alive. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. "And the groundskeeper, Brennan? Any more from him?" "Says he heard footsteps, nothing else. But we found something new, a cigarette butt near the bench branded Lucky Strike. Drake..."
Clara's hand flew to her ear, her composure cracking. "I lost one yesterday. But I wasn't in the park. I was at the hotel unpacking." "Your train arrived early," Poirot pressed. "You had time to visit the garden. And this falling out with your brother? Over money?" Clara's lips tightened. "Reggie thought I squandered our family's legacy. He was wrong, but I didn't kill him." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, his mind cataloguing her hesitation. "She lies, Hastings," he said as they left. "The earring places her near the scene, but is it proof? Or another red herring?" The day waned, and Poirot arranged a gathering at the conservatory garden, hoping to stir the suspects. Evelyn, Drake, Lang, and Clara arrived, their faces a study in unease. The French section was bathed in the soft light of lanterns, the fountain's gurgle a haunting backdrop. Poirot paced before them, his cane tapping softly. "Mes amis," he began, "Inspector Mallory was betrayed by someone close. The rose, the thermos, the sugar, they point to intimacy. Who among you knew his heart?" Evelyn dabbed her eyes. Drake shifted uncomfortably. Lang smirked, and Clara stared at the ground. As Poirot spoke, a note fluttered from Evelyn's purse, unnoticed by her but caught by Poirot's sharp eye. He retrieved it discreetly, reading, "Meet me at the fountain, midnight." The handwriting was elegant, unfamiliar. Whose? Before he could press further, a rustle in the hedges broke the tension. A figure darted into the shadows, too swift to pursue. "The watcher returns," Poirot murmured, his pulse quickening. "The killer grows bold." Back at the plaza, Poirot examined the note, its ink fresh, its words cryptic. "This meeting," he said to Hastings, "was it with Mallory or another? The fountain is key. It draws them all." Hastings frowned. "It's a tangle, Poirot. The glove, the earring, the cigarette, now this note. Are we closer or further from the truth?" "Closer."
"Poirot." "Oui," Poirot said, folding the note.
But danger is the shadow of truth. We press on. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the figures in the garden. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the mosaic: Lang's forged painting, Evelyn's tears, Drake's cigarette, Clara's earring, the rose's message. The art of deception was intricate, but Poirot was a master of unraveling. As he sipped his tisane, a new question emerged. Was the killer one or many? The garden held the answer, and Poirot would not rest until it spoke. 4. Whispers of the Past. The morning sun pierced the autumn haze over Manhattan, casting long shadows across the stone facade of the New York Police Department's precinct on Center Street. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming, navigated the bustling corridors with Captain Arthur Hastings at his side. The death of Inspector Reginald Mallory, poisoned by cyanide in the conservatory garden, a crimson rose clutched in his hand, had woven a tapestry of deceit that Poirot was determined to unravel. The monogrammed glove, the pearl earring, the scratched thermos lid, and the cryptic note found in Evelyn Mallory's purse all pointed to a killer who thrived on misdirection. Today, Poirot sought to delve into Mallory's past, for the roots of murder often lay buried in history. "Mon ami," Poirot said, adjusting his Homburg hat as they entered the precinct, "the present is but a reflection of the past. Inspector Mallory's life, his triumphs, his enemies, holds the key to his death. We must uncover what ghosts haunted him." Hastings nodded, his face etched with concern. "Mallory was a bulldog, Poirot. Chased smugglers, broke up crime rings. A man like that makes enemies. But poison, it's so personal." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his green eyes sharp. "The cyanide, the rose, they speak of intimacy, of betrayal. Let us see what the precinct reveals." Lieutenant Patrick O'Sullivan greeted them.
"This Reed, where is he now?" "Hangs out at a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen," O'Sullivan said. "Shady character, but no solid link to the murder yet." "And the inspector's personal life," Poirot pressed. "His wife, his sister, any shadows there?" O'Sullivan hesitated. "Mallory was private, but rumors swirled. He and Evelyn had a rocky marriage. Her spending habits clashed with his frugality. And Clara, his sister, showed up right before he died. Bad blood over their inheritance." Poirot nodded, absorbing the details. "And the cigarette butt, Lucky Strike, you said, Sergeant Drake's brand." "Yeah," O'Sullivan confirmed, "but Drake swears he quit smoking months ago. Could be a plant. A red herring, perhaps," Poirot mused. "We shall see." The precinct's archive room was a labyrinth of files, the air thick with dust and ink. Poirot pored over Mallory's records, his fingers tracing reports of past triumphs. A photograph caught his eye. A younger Mallory, grinning beside a partner, Detective James Conroy, killed in a corruption scandal a decade ago. "Mallory lost a partner," Poirot said softly. "A wound that lingers." Hastings frowned. "You think it's connected? That was years ago." "Time does not heal all wounds, mon ami," Poirot replied. "It festers some." Their next stop was Hell's Kitchen, where Tobias Reed lurked in a dimly lit bar called the Rusty Anchor. The air was heavy with cigarette smoke and the tang of cheap whiskey. Reed, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a scarred jaw, sat hunched in a corner booth. His gaze hardened as Poirot approached. "You the fancy detective?" he rasped. "Mallory ruined me. Framed me for that prohibition bust. 10 years in Sing Sing, and for what?"
Poirot's voice was calm but piercing. "And so, Monsieur Reed, you sought revenge. Where were you the night of his death?" Reed sneered, sipping his drink. "Alone, drinking. No one to vouch for me. But I didn't need poison to settle scores. I'd have used my fists." Poirot studied him.
"Mark, this shoe, perhaps Madame Mallory's or Clara's, or another we have not yet met." O'Sullivan joined them, bringing a fresh report. "Labs got more on the thermos. The sugar residue was deliberate, mixed to mask the cyanide. Mallory never took sugar, so someone else added it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A mistake, Lieutenant. The killer knew Mallory's habits but overlooked this detail. It points to someone close." They interviewed Evelyn Mallory again, this time at her townhouse on the Upper East Side. The parlor was a shrine to faded wealth, tattered velvet curtains, chipped porcelain. Evelyn, still in black, seemed frailer, her veil discarded, but her eyes guarded. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I've told you everything. Reggie was distant, obsessed with his case. Our argument at the gala was nothing, just money worries." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "Madame, your bridge game. Your friends hesitate. Mrs. Astor says you left early. Where did you go?" Evelyn's hands twisted her handkerchief. "I went home. I was unwell. Please, I loved Reggie." Poirot noted the lie in her eyes. "And this note, found in your purse, meet me at the fountain midnight. Your handwriting?" Evelyn paled. "No, I don't know how it got there." As they left, Hastings murmured, "She's hiding something, Poirot. That note. Could she have met Mallory that night?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "But the note's ink was fresh. A plant or a genuine clue?" Next, they confronted Sergeant Harlan Drake at the precinct. His uniform was crisp, but his face was haggard. "I told you, Poirot," he said, his voice tight. "I was at the precinct working late. That cigarette butt, I quit smoking. Someone's framing me." Poirot held up the precinct log obtained from O'Sullivan. "Your entries, Monsieur Drake, are incomplete. You left at 6:45 p.m., returned at 9. Where were you?" Drake's jaw clenched. "Running errands, personal matters, nothing to do with Mallory." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Personal matters that coincide swiftly, death within minutes." The sugar in the tea was a fatal error, pointing to someone who knew Mallory's habits, but not his aversions. The cigarette butt, the glove, the earring, all distractions perhaps, but the note was different. Its midnight rendezvous suggested a planned meeting, one Mallory may have kept. Poirot paced, his cane tapping. "The fountain," he said. "It is the heart of this mystery. The note, the rose, they converge there." Hastings frowned. "But who wrote it? Evelyn? Clara? Lang? Or another?" Poirot said. "We must test the alibis further. Lang's auction, Evelyn's bridge game, Drake's errands, Clara's train, they crumble under scrutiny." As night fell, Poirot returned to the garden alone, the lanterns casting eerie shadows. The French section was silent, the fountain's gurgle a whisper of secrets. He stood by the bench, imagining Mallory's final moments. The thermos, tampered with here, the rose, placed as a taunt. A rustle in the hedges snapped him from his thoughts. He turned, but saw only darkness. Then a phone rang in the distance, its jangle cutting through the silence. He traced the sound to a nearby booth, answering cautiously. A voice, low and distorted, hissed, "Stay away, Poirot, or you'll join Mallory in the dirt." The line went dead. Poirot's lips curved. The killer grows desperate. Good. Desperation breeds mistakes. Back at the hotel, he showed Hastings the precinct log, the cigarette butt report, and the note. "The web tightens," he said. "Tomorrow, we confront the suspects together."
The garden will speak, and the past will betray the guilty. The fire crackled, its light dancing on Poirot's notebook, where he sketched the fountain, the rose, the thermos. The whispers of Mallory's past, his lost partner, his enemies, his fractured family, were growing louder. The killer had struck in the garden, but their shadow lingered, and Poirot was closing in.
Chapter 5. The Gathering Storm. The Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, its gilded walls a stark contrast to the dark secrets Hercule Poirot sought to unravel. It was the evening of October 1933, and the air in New York crackled with the tension of an approaching storm, both meteorological and human. Inspector Reginald Mallory's murder in the conservatory garden, poisoned by cyanide-laced tea with a crimson rose in his hand, had drawn a net of suspicion around his wife Evelyn, Sergeant Harlan Drake, art dealer Victor Lang, sister Clara Mallory, and ex-convict Tobias Reed. The monogrammed glove, pearl earring, cigarette butt, and cryptic note had woven a complex tapestry of clues and red herrings. Tonight, Poirot had orchestrated a soirée to stir the suspects, hoping their reactions would betray the guilty. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Captain Arthur Hastings as they adjusted their evening attire, "this gathering is a crucible. The suspects, they will reveal themselves through their unease. Watch their eyes, their hands. The truth hides in the smallest gestures." Hastings, fastening his cufflinks, frowned. "It's a risky move, Poirot. Bringing them all together in one room, with a killer among them? And that threatening note you received. Stay away or join Mallory. Someone's desperate." Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "Desperation, Hastings, is the crack in the facade. Tonight, we widen it." The ballroom filled with the murmur of guests, society figures invited to mask the true purpose of the evening, mingling with the suspects under Poirot's watchful gaze. Evelyn Mallory entered first, her black morning dress stark against her pale skin, her eyes darting nervously. Sergeant Drake followed, his uniform crisp but his shoulders tense, as if bracing for an ambush. Victor Lang sauntered in, his slick charm undimmed, a cigarette glowing between his fingers. Clara Mallory, elegant in emerald silk, clutched a champagne flute too tightly, her single pearl earring glinting. Tobias Reed lurked at the edges, his scarred face shadowed, his parole officer near.
The thermos, tampered with, bore sugar, a fatal error, for Mallory despised it. The glove, monogrammed VL, points to Monsieur Lang, yet he claims it lost. The pearl earring, perhaps Mademoiselle Clara's, found near the bench. The cigarette, a lucky strike, suggests Sergeant Drake, though he denies smoking. And the note, "Meet me at the fountain, midnight," found in Madame Mallory's purse. Each clue, a thread in a web of deceit. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "That note wasn't mine. Someone planted it." Drake stepped forward, his voice rough. "And that cigarette, I quit months ago. This is a setup." Lang exhaled smoke, his tone mocking. "You're grasping, Poirot. My glove? Stolen. My alibi? Ironclad. You've got nothing." Clara's voice was sharp. "My earring was lost before I even reached New York. I'm being framed." Reed snarled from the shadows. "You're all wasting time. Mallory got what he deserved, but it wasn't me." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough. Let us examine the evidence anew." He produced a police report, obtained from Lieutenant O'Sullivan that morning. The lab found cyanide traces, not only in the thermos, but in a vanity case belonging to Madame Mallory. Evelyn's face crumpled. "That's impossible. I don't use cyanide." "Planted, perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes never leaving her. "Or not.
And you, Sergeant Drake, a witness saw you near the garden's entrance at 7 p.m., despite your claim of precinct paperwork. Drake's face reddened. I was checking on a lead, nothing more. Poirot turned to Clara. Mademoiselle, your train arrived at 5:45 p.m. Yet you claim to have reached your hotel only after 8. Where were you? Clara's fingers tightened on her glass. I was delayed. Luggage issues. I didn't go to the park. Lang laughed softly. You're chasing ghosts, Poirot. My auction alibi holds. Ask Sotheby's. Poirot's smile was thin. We shall, Monsieur Lang. But let us consider the rose. In Mallory,
They're cracking, Poirot. But who's the weakest link? Poirot's gaze swept the room. Patience, mon ami. This storm breaks soon. He produced Mallory's diary, its pages worn from scrutiny. A final clue. An entry, coded, reading, Betrayed by kin. Who among you is kin to Mallory? Madame Evelyn, his wife? Mademoiselle Clara, his sister? Or is kin a metaphor for trust? Clara's glass slipped, shattering on the floor. That's nonsense. Reggie and I fought, but I didn't betray him. Evelyn clutched her necklace, her voice barely audible. Kin? No, it can't be. Drake stepped forward, his voice low. You're stirring up trouble, Poirot. That diary's just scribbles. Lang chuckled, but his eyes were cold. You're losing your touch, detective. Accusing everyone gets you nowhere. Reed remained silent, his scarred face unreadable. Poirot noted each reaction, his mind cataloging. The truth, he said, is in the details. The sugar in the tea, the note's fresh ink, the earring's placement. One of you has woven a lie too intricate to hold. Thunder crashed, closer now, and the chandeliers flickered. The crowd murmured, sensing the drama's peak. Poirot raised his voice. Let us imagine the scene. Mallory, alone by the fountain, sipping his tea. The killer approaches, trusted, familiar. The poison is swift, the rose a final taunt. But the sugar betrays them, a mistake born of ignorance. Evelyn's hands shook, her eyes wide. I knew he hated sugar. I'd never... Drake cut in, his voice sharp. Enough of this. You're accusing us all without proof. Poirot's eyes locked on him. Proof, Monsieur Drake? It comes. Your log shows gaps. Your presence near the garden confirmed. And you, Madame Evelyn, your bridge friends admit you left early. Evelyn gasped, her face ashen. Lang's cigarette dropped, smoldering on the carpet. Clara's eyes darted to the exit. Reed's fists clenched, but he said nothing. Suddenly, lightning illuminated the room, casting stark shadows. The chandeliers flickered again, their faces a gallery of guilt and fear. Evelyn clutched her purse. Drake's hand hovered near his holster. Lang's smirk was gone. Clara's eyes were wide, and Reed's gaze was fixed on the dagger. The storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows, mirroring the chaos within. Poirot addressed the room. This dagger confirms it. The killer is among us, watching, listening. But they cannot hide forever. The rose, the note, the sugar. They will betray you. As O'Sullivan began questioning guests, Poirot pulled Hastings aside. The dagger is theatrical, mon ami, meant to intimidate. But it reveals much. The killer knows we are close. Hastings frowned. But who? Evelyn's crumbling, Drake's defensive, Lang's rattled, Clara's lying, and Reed's a wild card. All are guilty of something, Poirot said, but only one of murder. We must return to the garden tomorrow. The fountain holds the final clue. The soiree ended in disarray, the suspects dispersing under O'Sullivan's watchful eye. Poirot and Hastings returned to their suite,
the dagger in an evidence bag. Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open, sketching the ballroom's layout, the suspects' positions, the dagger's placement. "The note said midnight," he murmured. "The dagger appeared at 9:47 p.m. The killer acts out of sequence, panicked." Hastings poured a brandy, his hands unsteady. "This is getting dangerous, Poirot. That dagger was meant for you." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "But it is the killer who should fear. Their web is fraying." He reviewed the clues: the cyanide in Evelyn's vanity, Drake's presence near the garden, Lang's shaky alibi, Clara's early arrival, Reed's lack of alibi. The diaries, betrayed by kin, echoed. But was it literal or figurative? The rose, the sugar, the note, all pointed to intimacy, to someone Mallory trusted. But who? As the storm raged, Poirot's mind raced. The dagger was a bold move, but it exposed the killer's fear. Lang's faltering smirk, Clara Mallory's nervous lies, and Tobias Reed's simmering rage. The dagger left on the table, a brazen threat to Poirot, had only sharpened his resolve. The threads of this mystery, glove, earring, cigarette, note, and sugar-laced tea, were beginning to unravel, and Poirot sensed the truth was near. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his cane tapping rhythmically on the path. "Last night's drama was illuminating. The dagger, it was not merely a threat, but a confession of fear. The killer knows we approach the heart of their deception." Hastings, his face drawn from a sleepless night, nodded. "That blackout, Poirot, it gave them the chance to plant that dagger. But who? Evelyn's crumbling, Drake's hiding something, Lang's alibi is shaky, Clara's lying about her timing, and Reed, he's a loose cannon." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "Each thread leads to the same knot, the fountain, the rose, the thermos. Today, we pull harder." The conservatory garden unfolded before them, its French section a symphony of order with its geometric flower beds and marble fountain, where dancing maidens stood frozen in stone. The air carried the faint scent of chrysanthemums, their petals still crushed from the night of the murder. Poirot paused by the bench where Mallory's body was found, his gloved hands tracing the marble's cold surface. "Here," he murmured. Mallory sat, sipping his tea, unaware of the poison. The killer was close, trusted, perhaps loved. Hastings shivered, the morning chill seeping through his coat. "It's eerie, Poirot. This place looks peaceful, but it's a graveyard of secrets." Poirot crouched, examining the ground anew. The scuff mark of a woman's heel, noted earlier, was still visible, but a new detail caught his eye. A faint imprint in the soil, rectangular, as if something small had been dropped and retrieved. "A clue, Hastings," he said, sketching it in his notebook. "A box, perhaps, or a vial." Lieutenant O'Sullivan joined them. He rasped, his voice laced with defiance. "I told you, I didn't kill Mallory." Poirot sat opposite, his gaze unrelenting. "Monsieur Reed, a witness places you near the garden, arguing with a woman. Who was she?" Reed's hand tightened on his glass. "You're fishing. I was nowhere near the park. Whoever saw me is lying." "Or you are," Poirot countered. "Your hatred for Mallory is no secret. 10 years in prison, courtesy of his investigation. And now a woman, your accomplice?" Reed leaned forward, his voice low. "I saw someone, all right. A woman, near the fountain, talking to Mallory before he died. Tall, dark hair, fancy coat.
But it wasn't me arguing with her. I was just watching. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Watching? A convenient tale. Describe this woman. Reed shrugged. Couldn't see her face. Fog was thick, but she moved like she owned the place. As they left the bar, Hastings whispered, "He's lying, Poirot, or holding back. That woman, Evelyn or Clara?" "Or neither," Poirot said. "We must test his story. But first, Monsieur Lang." They headed to Victor Lang's gallery on Fifth Avenue, its opulent interior a stark contrast to the seedy bar. Lang greeted them with his usual smirk, but his eyes were wary, his cigarette trembling slightly. "Back so soon, Poirot," he said, exhaling smoke. "I told you my alibi's solid. Sotheby's, Renoir, lot 42. Poirot produced the auction ledger, obtained from O'Sullivan. "Monsieur Lang, your bid is recorded, yes. But the auction ended at 9 p.m., and Mallory died between 7 and 8:30. You had time to reach the garden." Lang's smirk faded. "I was at the auction house all evening. Grayson will confirm." "Grayson confirms you bid," Poirot said. "But you left early, claiming a headache. Where did you go?" Lang's eyes darted to the forged Rembrandt on the wall, the same one Poirot had questioned before. "Business rivals," he admitted, his voice tight. "I met a client in Brooklyn."
The precinct. His broad shoulders tense, his eyes evasive. "I've told you everything," he said, his voice rough. "I was at the precinct, not the garden." Poirot held up the witness report. "A man matching your description was seen near the entrance at 7 p.m. And your log. Gaps, Monsieur Drake. Explain." Drake's face reddened. "I was protecting Mallory, following a lead on his smuggling case. I saw nothing." "Protecting?" Poirot's tone was sharp. "Or ensuring his silence?" Drake's fists clenched. "I respected him, even if he passed me over. You're barking up the wrong tree." As Drake left, Poirot murmured, "He conceals much. His protection is a weak thread." Next, they confronted Clara Mallory at the Waldorf. Her auburn hair was disheveled, her defiance fading. "I've done nothing wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "That earring, I lost it before I reached New York." Poirot produced a hotel receipt. "Mademoiselle, you checked in at 6 p.m., yet claimed to be delayed until 8. And this, cyanide vials found in your luggage." Clara gasped, her eyes wide. "Those aren't mine. Someone planted them." "Convenient," Poirot said, his gaze piercing. "Your quarrel with your brother, over his will, enough to kill?" "Never," Clara cried. "I loved Reggie, despite everything." As they left, Hastings said, "She's terrified, Poirot. Framed or guilty?" "Perhaps both," Poirot replied. "The vials are too obvious, a distraction. But the earring places her near the scene." They returned to the garden, drawn by the fountain's pull. Poirot stood by the bench, reconstructing the timeline. Mallory entered at 7 p.m., drank the poisoned tea, died by 8:30. The woman in the shadows, seen by Reed, was key. Evelyn, Clara, or another? As dusk fell, a gunshot shattered the silence, echoing from the Italian section's pergola. Poirot and Hastings raced toward the sound, lanterns flickering. They found Tobias Reed slumped against a statue, blood seeping from his shoulder. "The killer," he prop. But who was the director? As rain began to fall, Poirot stared out at the park. The city's lights blurred. "Tomorrow," he said, "we confront the woman. The threads unravel, and the truth will stand bare." The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced like the killer's lies. Poirot's little grey cells burned, the mosaic nearly complete. The garden's secrets were fraying, and the killer's mask was slipping. Chapter 7. The Web Tightens. The rain had ceased, leaving Central Park glistening under a pale October sun in 1933. But the air in New York carried a tension as taut as a spider's web. Hercule Poirot, his patent leather shoes navigating the damp paths of the conservatory garden, felt the strands of Inspector Reginald Mallory's murder drawing tighter. Poisoned by cyanide-laced tea, a crimson rose in his hand, Mallory's death had ensnared a cast of suspects. His wife Evelyn, Sergeant Harlan Drake, art dealer Victor Lang, sister Clara Mallory, and ex-convict Tobias Reed, now wounded by a gunshot in the garden's Italian section. The glove, earring, cigarette butt, cryptic note, cyanide vials, and sugar residue in the thermos were threads in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot's little grey cells were weaving them into clarity. The previous night's dagger at the plaza and Reed's shooting had exposed the killer's desperation, and Poirot sensed the final act approaching. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Captain Arthur Hastings, his cane tapping rhythmically. "The web tightens, but the spider is cunning. The killer strikes to silence Reed, yet leaves us a trail. Today, we follow it to the fountain." Hastings, his coat damp from the morning's drizzle, frowned. "Reed's shooting changes everything, Poirot. He saw a woman with Mallory. Evelyn or Clara? And those cyanide vials in Clara's luggage. Too convenient, don't you think?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "The vials are a distraction, but the woman in the framing her." "A frame, I suspect," Poirot said. "The killer plants clues to mislead, but the sugar in the tea, that was no plant. It betrays intimacy." Their first stop was the NYPD precinct, where Poirot delved deeper into Mallory's case files. The inspector's notes on the art smuggling ring were meticulous, detailing shipments of stolen paintings through New York's ports. A new detail emerged. Cyanide, used in gilding frames, was a common tool in the art world. "Monsieur Lang's gallery," Poirot said, tapping the file. "It is the hub of this operation. Mallory was close to exposing him." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "You think Lang's the killer? His alibi's shaky, but poison seems personal for a man like him." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but the smuggling connects to the poison. We must confront him again." They headed to Lang's gallery on Fifth Avenue, its opulent interior a facade of legitimacy. Victor Lang greeted them with a strained smile, his cigarette trembling slightly. "Back again, Poirot," he said, exhaling smoke. "You're persistent. I've told you everything. Sotheby's, Renoir, Lot 42. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Your auction ended at 9 p.m., Monsieur Lang. Yet Mallory died before 8:30. And this," he produced a forged auction ticket, obtained from O'Sullivan. "Your alibi crumbles. Where were you?" Lang's smirk faded, his fingers crushing the cigarette. "A clerical error. I was with a client, as I said, private business." "Business involving cyanide," Poirot pressed. "Your gallery uses it for gilding. Convenient, no?" Lang laughed, but it was hollow. "You're reaching, Poirot. I'm no chemist. Check my records." "We shall," Poirot said, his gaze lingering on the forged Rembrandt. "Your empire, monsieur, is built on lies." As they left, Hastings whispered, "He's nervous, Poirot. That ticket, he's covering something big." "Oui," Poirot agreed. "But is it murder or merely smuggling? We turn now to Madame Mallory."
intimate?
Evelyn's sob was genuine, but Poirot noted her hesitation. "The note in your purse?" he continued. "Meet me at the fountain, midnight." "Your handwriting?" "No," she cried. "I swear, it's not mine." As they left, Hastings murmured, "She's breaking, Poirot. Those debts. Could Lang have blackmailed her?" "Possibly," Poirot said. "But the note suggests a deeper connection. Let us see Monsieur Drake." Sergeant Harlan Drake met them at the precinct, his uniform crisp, but his face haggard. "I'm tired of this, Poirot," he said, his voice rough. "I was working, not murdering. That cigarette butt? Planted." Poirot held up the precinct log. "Your work left gaps, monsieur. A camera caught you leaving at 6:45 p.m. near the garden, and a witness saw you there." Drake's fists clenched. "I was following a lead on Mallory's case, protecting him. I saw nothing." "Protecting?" Poirot's tone was sharp. "Or ensuring his silence? You coveted his position." Drake's eyes flashed. "I respected him, even if he didn't see my worth. You've got no proof." As Drake stormed off, Poirot murmured, "His anger betrays him. He was near the garden. Why?" Clara Mallory was next, summoned to the Waldorf. Her auburn hair was pinned tightly, but her hands shook. "I'm innocent," she insisted. "Those cyanide vials, someone planted them." Poirot produced her train ticket. "Mademoiselle, you arrived at 5:45 p.m., yet claim to have reached your hotel at 8. And your earring, found near the bench. Explain." Clara's eyes widened. "I lost it days ago. And yes, I arrived early, but I was at the hotel, not the park." "Your quarrel with your brother," Poirot pressed, "over his will. Enough to kill?" "Never!" Clara cried. "I loved Reggie, despite his judgment." As they left, Hastings said, "She's scared, Poirot. Framed or guilty?" "Framed, I think," Poirot replied. "The vials are too obvious."
Frowned. A message from the killer? Or a coincidence? "No coincidence," Poirot said. "The killer chose this spot, this symbol." They searched the fountain's base, finding a hidden crevice with a scrap of paper, another note in the same elegant handwriting. "The rose seals the pact." Poirot's pulse quickened. "A pact," he said. "The killer did not act alone." Back at the plaza, Poirot spread his notes, the threads aligning. The sugar, the note, the earring, the glove, the cigarette, the vials, the footprints, now the inscription. The diary's rose betrayal and sweet deception pointed to a conspiracy. "The woman in the shadows," Poirot said. "She is one part, but who is her partner?" Hastings poured a brandy, his hands unsteady. "Lang and Evelyn? Drake and Clara? Or Reed, playing us all?" "All are tangled," Poirot said, "but the fountain is the center. Tomorrow we confront them all." As night deepened, Poirot sat by the fire, his notebook open. The inscription, "Betrayal blooms eternal," echoed the rose, the note, the murder. The killer's web was fraying, their desperation clear in Reed's shooting, the dagger, the notes. Poirot's little grey cells burned, the mosaic nearly complete. The garden's secrets were unraveling, and the truth was within reach. Chapter 8. Revelations in the Mist. The conservatory garden lay cloaked in a dense October mist, its French section a spectral stage where the truth of Inspector Reginald Mallory's murder was poised to emerge. It was evening in 1933, and the air in New York was thick with the scent of damp earth and fading chrysanthemums. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat beaded with moisture, stood by the marble bench where Mallory had died, poisoned by cyanide-laced tea
a crimson rose in his hand. The web of clues, monogrammed glove, pearl earring, cigarette butt, cryptic notes, cyanide vials, sugared tea, footprints, and the fountain's haunting inscription had tightened around the suspects. Evelyn Mallory, Sergeant Harlan Drake, Victor Lang, Clara Mallory, gathered near the fountain. Its gurgling maidens a ghostly chorus in the mist. Evelyn Mallory stood, frail in black, her eyes darting nervously. Sergeant Harlan Drake, his uniform crisp, but his jaw tight, scanned the shadows. Victor Lang, cigarette absent for once, exuded a brittle confidence. Clara Mallory, her auburn hair damp, clutched her purse with trembling hands. Tobias Reed, bandaged from his gunshot wound, glowered from the edge, his parole officer nearby. Lieutenant O'Sullivan flanked Poirot, his burly frame alert, ready to intervene. Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the fog like a blade. Mesdames et messieurs, we stand where Inspector Mallory met his end. Poisoned by cyanide in his thermos, a rose placed in his hand, a symbol of betrayal. Tonight, the garden speaks, and the guilty will be unmasked. A murmur rippled through the group. Evelyn's handkerchief fluttered to her lips, Drake's fists clenched. Lang's eyes narrowed, Clara's breath hitched, and Reed's scar twitched. Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically, the fountain's inscription, "Betrayal blooms eternal," etched in his mind. "Let us unravel the threads," Poirot began. The method, cyanide, mixed in Mallory's tea, laced with sugar to mask its bitterness. But Mallory despised sugar, a fatal error by the killer, revealing intimacy but ignorance. The thermos, scratched, suggests tampering here, in this garden. The rose, thornless, was no accident, a message of love turned to treachery. Evelyn's voice trembled. "I knew Reggie hated sugar. I'd never make that mistake." Poirot's gaze locked on her. "Yet cyanide was found in your vanity case, madame. And your bridge game alibi falters. You left early." "It was planted," Evelyn cried, her eyes wide. "I was home, grieving." Poirot turned to Drake. "Monsieur Drake, you were seen near the garden at 7 p.m., despite claiming precinct
Implicate you. A distraction. The cigarette, Monsieur Drake, a clumsy attempt to shift blame. The earring, Mademoiselle Clara, perhaps yours, but lost or placed to mislead. The vials, too obvious, a frame. But the note, "Meet me at the fountain, midnight," and the fountain's inscription, "Betrayal blooms eternal." These are the heart of the matter. He produced Mallory's diary, its coded entries open. The inspector wrote of a rose betrayal and sweet deception. The sugar in the tea, the rose in his hand, they point to a killer who knew his heart. And the witness, Reed, saw a woman. But there is more. Poirot's voice grew sharper. The killer is among you, and their motive is clear. Mallory's investigation into the art smuggling ring threatened ruin. But the rose suggests a personal wound. Let us consider the timeline. Mallory entered the garden at 7 p.m., drank the poison tea, died by 8:30. The cyanide acted swiftly, administered by one he trusted. He turned to Drake. "Monsieur Drake, your motive, promotion, and perhaps complicity in the smuggling. You were near the garden, your alibi weak. The sugar in the tea. You knew Mallory's habits from working closely. Did you add it, hoping to mask the poison?" Drake's face twisted. "Prove it, Poirot."
I was loyal to Mallory, even if he passed me over. Poirot's gaze shifted to Evelyn. Madam Mallory, your debts to Lang, your strained marriage. Mallory discovered something, no? An affair, perhaps, that threatened your standing. Evelyn's sob was raw. No, I loved Reggie. Despite everything, I'd never... Before she could finish, a shout interrupted. Enough! Drake lunged forward, his hand reaching for his holster, but O'Sullivan restrained him. The crowd gasped, the mist swirling as tension peaked. Poirot remained calm. A reaction, Monsieur Drake, but let us test the truth. The sugar residue, you added it, forgetting Mallory's aversion. Your log gaps align with the murder. You were in the garden, meeting Mallory under the guise of lanterns flickering as Poirot, Hastings, and O'Sullivan gave chase, the fog swallowing their steps. He heads to the labyrinth, Poirot called, his cane abandoned as he moved with surprising agility. The Italian section's vine-covered arches loomed, shadows twisting in the mist. A gunshot rang out, the bullet grazing a statue. He's armed, Hastings yelled, ducking. Poirot's voice was steady. He panics, Hastings. The web collapses. They cornered Drake by the pergola, his pistol raised but trembling. Stay back, he shouted. I didn't kill him. It was her idea. Her? Poirot pressed, stepping forward, fearless. Name her, monsieur. Drake's eyes darted to the shadows, where a figure emerged. Clara Mallory, her face pale, a pistol in her hand. You fool, she hissed at Drake. You've ruined everything. Poirot's voice was calm. Mademoiselle Clara, the woman in the shadows. You supplied the cyanide, no? Your earring, your early arrival. You were in the garden. Clara's laugh was brittle. You're clever, Poirot, but too late. She raised the pistol, but O'Sullivan tackled her, the weapon clattering to the ground. Drake dropped his, surrendering as officers swarmed. Poirot turned to the crowd. Evelyn sobbing. Lang frozen. Reed grimly satisfied. The truth emerges, he said, but not fully. Drake and Clara acted together, but there is more. The fountain holds the final secret. Hastings grabbed his arm. Poirot, it's over! You've got them! Non, Poirot said, his eyes on the fountain. The spider is caught, but the web has another master. As officers cuffed Drake and Clara, the mist thickened, obscuring the garden. Poirot retrieved his cane, his mind racing. The rose, the note, the inscription. They pointed to a deeper betrayal. Was Evelyn's confession a lie, or a half-truth? Lang's silence, was it guilt or fear? The garden whispered, but its final secret remained hidden. Sergeant Harlan Drake had fled into the fog after Clara Mallory's dramatic confrontation. Her pistol wrested away by Lieutenant O'Sullivan. The revelation that Drake and Clara were complicit in Inspector Reginald Mallory's murder, poisoned by cyanide-laced tea, a crimson rose in his hand, had shattered the gathering at the fountain. Yet Poirot sensed the web of deceit had deeper strands, and the chase through the garden's maze was far from over. Mon ami, Poirot said to Captain Arthur Hastings, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. The labyrinth hides the guilty, but it also traps them. Drake runs, but he cannot escape the truth. Hastings, lantern in hand, his face pale in the flickering light, panted, Clara's confession, Poirot, her pistol, Drake's flight, they're guilty. But is there more? That note, the rose, it feels unfinished. Oui, Poirot replied, his green eyes piercing the mist.
The spider is caught, but the web has a master. We pursue, and the garden will yield its final secret. The Italian section's pergola loomed, its arches draped in ivy, statues of gods and muses standing sentinel in the fog. O'Sullivan, his burly frame leading a squad of officers, shouted, "Drake's headed for the English section! He's armed! Stay sharp!" The crack of a gunshot echoed, the bullet ricocheting off a marble form, sending shards flying. Hastings ducked, his lantern swaying. "He's desperate, Poirot. This is madness!" Poirot, undeterred, moved with surprising agility, his cane tapping the path. "Desperation is clarity, Hastings. Drake flees because he knows we see his guilt. But Clara, her outburst was too sudden, too theatrical. There is another hand at work." The chase wove through the pergola's twists, the mist cloaking their steps. Officers fanned out, their lanterns casting eerie beams. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the clues. The monogrammed glove, pearl earring, cigarette butt, cyanide vials, sugared tea, cryptic notes, and the fountain's inscription. Betrayal blooms eternal. Drake's presence in the garden, Clara's early arrival,
his pistol drawn. "Reed, you shouldn't be here. You're a witness, not a vigilante." Reed's scar twitched. "Mallory ruined me, but I want the truth. Drake's not alone." Poirot nodded, his mind whirring. "The woman in the shadows, seen by Reed on the night of the murder. Not Clara, she was the bait. Another pulls the strings." They pressed deeper into the English section, where roses tangled in unruly splendor, their thorns catching at Poirot's coat. The mist thickened, muffling sounds, but a rustle ahead betrayed movement. "There," Hastings whispered, pointing to a shadow darting between statues. O'Sullivan signaled his men to flank the area, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. Poirot paused, his keen senses attuned. "The crushed petals," he murmured, noting a trail of bruised rose petals leading toward a stone bench. "Drake panics, leaving a path. Follow it, vite." The trail led to the garden's heart, a clearing where a fountain, smaller than the French sections, stood silent, its basin dry. Drake emerged from the fog, his pistol raised, his face a mask of fury. "Stay back, Poirot," he shouted. "You don't understand what's at stake." Poirot stepped forward, fearless. "I understand, Monsieur Drake. You poisoned Mallory, yes, with Clara's cyanide. Your motive, promotion, and to protect your role in the smuggling ring. The sugar in the tea was your error. You forgot Mallory's aversion." Drake's hand shook, the pistol wavering. "It wasn't just me. Clara, she supplied the poison, planned it." "And who else?" Poirot pressed, his voice a scalpel. "The woman in the shadows, seen by Reed. Not Clara, she was your accomplice, but not the master." Drake's eyes darted to the fog, where a figure materialized. Evelyn Mallory, her black mourning dress blending with the mist, a small revolver in her hand. "Enough, Harlan," she cried. "You've said too much." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Madame Mallory, the spider at last. Your false confession at the soirée. To protect Drake, no? But murder? Never."
Reed, leaning on an officer, snarled, "They all betrayed him. I saw it coming, but too late." Poirot addressed the group, his voice resonating through the fog. "The truth emerges, mes amis. Evelyn Mallory, driven by debts and fear, conspired with Drake and Clara. The rose from her own garden was her signature, a taunt of love turned to betrayal. The note, 'Meet me at the fountain,' lured Mallory to his death. The sugar, a mistake, sealed their guilt." Evelyn struggled against O'Sullivan's grip. "You have no proof. It's all conjecture."
Poirot produced the second note, found at the fountain. The rose seals the pact. Your handwriting, madame, he said, and the cyanide in your vanity case, not planted but yours. Drake's presents, Clara's vials, the crushed petals, they all point to you. Drake's shoulders slumped. It's true, he muttered. Evelyn planned it. I just followed orders. The officers cuffed Evelyn, her face a mask of defeat. Clara wept, her defiance gone. Lang stood silent, his empire teetering. Reed's eyes gleamed with grim satisfaction. The mist began to lift, the garden's secrets laid bare. Poirot retrieved his cane, his voice calm. The labyrinth is navigated, but one thread remains. Monsieur Lang, your smuggling funded this tragedy, no? You are not innocent. Lang's jaw tightened. I dealt in art, not death. Arrest me for smuggling, but not this. O'Sullivan nodded. We'll sort him out at the precinct. For now, we've got our killers. Hastings, breathless, grabbed Poirot's arm. It's over, Poirot. You've done it. No, Poirot said softly, his eyes on the fountain. The garden has spoken, but its echo lingers. We return to the precinct for the final act. As officers led Evelyn, Drake, and Clara away, Poirot lingered, examining the dry fountain. A final clue caught his eye. A single rose petal, fresh, tucked into a crack in the stone. The pact, he murmured.
Interrogation room on Center Street was a stark contrast to the opulent conservatory garden, its bare walls and flickering fluorescent lights casting a harsh glare over the final act of Inspector Reginald Mallory's murder investigation. It was the morning of October 1933, and New York's autumn chill seeped through the windows, mirroring the cold truth Hercule Poirot was about to unveil. The case, Mallory poisoned by cyanide-laced tea, a crimson rose in his hand, had unraveled through a labyrinth of clues: a monogrammed glove, pearl earring, cigarette butt, cryptic notes, cyanide vials, sugared tea, footprints, and the fountain's haunting inscription, "Betrayal blooms eternal." The previous night's chase through the garden's Italian section had ensnared Sergeant Harlan Drake and Clara Mallory, but Poirot's little gray cells insisted a deeper mastermind wove the web. Now, in this sterile room, he would lay bare the full truth. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Captain Arthur Hastings, adjusting his Homburg hat as they entered. "The garden has spoken, but the precinct is where the curtain falls. The killer's mask is slipping, and today we remove it entirely." Hastings, his face etched with fatigue from the night's chaos, nodded. "Drake and Clara are in custody, Poirot, and Evelyn's confession, false or not, points to her. But you think there's more, don't you? Lang, perhaps?" "Oui," Poirot replied, his green eyes gleaming. "The web is intricate, but every thread leads to the center. Let us assemble the players." Lieutenant Patrick O'Sullivan had arranged for the suspects to be brought to the precinct. Evelyn Mallory, pale and trembling in her black mourning dress. Harlan Drake, defiant despite his cuffs. Clara Mallory, her auburn hair disheveled, her defiance broken. Victor Lang, his slick charm frayed. And Tobias Reed, bandaged but alert, his parole officer at his side. The room was heavy with tension, the air thick with unspoken guilt and fear. Poirot stood at the head of the table, his small stature commanding the space. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant. "Inspector Reginald Mallory," to mask the bitterness. "He died by 8:30. The rose a final taunt. The killer was close, trusted, intimate. But the sugar was a mistake. Mallory despised it. A detail only those closest would know, yet overlook. He turned to Evelyn. "Madame Mallory,
Your bridge game alibi faltered. You left early. Cyanide was found in your vanity case, not planted. And the note, "Meet me at the fountain, midnight," in your purse. You confessed last night, claiming an affair with Drake drove you to murder. A noble lie, no? Evelyn's sob was raw. I wanted to protect Harlan. Reggie knew about us, threatened to expose me. I couldn't let him ruin me. Poirot's gaze shifted to Drake. Monsieur Drake, you were seen near the garden, your log riddled with gaps. The cigarette butt. Lucky strike. Your brand. Though you claim to have quit. You admitted complicity. But as whose pawn? Drake's eyes burned. Evelyn planned it. I just followed her lead. She gave me the cyanide, told me to make sure it worked. Clara's voice broke through, trembling. It's true. Evelyn manipulated me, said it was just to scare Reggie. I gave her the cyanide, but I didn't know he'd die. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Mademoiselle Clara, your earring, your early arrival. You were in the garden, yes, but as a tool. The vials in your luggage, planted to frame you. But you, Madame Evelyn, are the heart of this plot. Evelyn's face crumpled, tears streaming. I had no choice. Reggie controlled everything. My money, my life. He found out about Harlan, about my debts to Lang. I met him at the fountain, gave him the tea. The rose was mine, from our garden. I thought it fitting. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Fitting, madam. A rose without thorns, a symbol of love turned to betrayal. But there is more. Monsieur Lang, your smuggling ring couldn't lose everything. Harlan loved me, promised to protect me. Clara was easy to manipulate, angry at Reggie. Lang wanted Mallory gone as much as I did. Drake's voice was low. I did it for her. Mallory was going to ruin us both. Clara wept. I thought it was just a warning. I didn't want him dead. Lang's hands shook. I'm no murderer. I gave her the cyanide, yes, but only to settle her debts. Poirot's voice was calm but unrelenting. You are all guilty, in degrees. Evelyn, the mastermind, driven by fear and greed. Drake, her lover and executioner, ensuring the poison took hold. Clara, the unwitting accomplice, providing the means. Lang, the enabler, whose smuggling empire fueled the plot. The rose from Evelyn's garden was her confession, a love she betrayed. O'Sullivan stepped forward, cuffs ready. That's enough for me. Evelyn Mallory, Harlan Drake, Clara Mallory, Victor Lang, you're all under arrest. Evelyn's sobs filled the room as officers cuffed her. Drake hung his head, Clara collapsed in tears, and Lang's protests were feeble. Reed watched, his eyes cold but satisfied. Justice for Mallory, he muttered. Poirot addressed the room one final time. The red herrings, glove, earring, cigarette, were distractions, planted to confuse. The sugar, the notes, the inscription, they were the truth. Mallory's diary spoke of rose betrayal and sweet deception, pointing to Evelyn's heart. The fountain where love and death met sealed their pact. Hastings, his face a mix of awe and exhaustion, grabbed Poirot's arm. You've done it, Poirot. The whole conspiracy laid bare. Oui, Poirot said, his voice soft. But justice is a heavy burden. The garden's secrets are revealed, but its scars remain. As officers led the suspects away, Poirot lingered, his notebook open. The mosaic was complete. Evelyn's orchestration, Drake's complicity, Clara's manipulation, Lang's enabling, Reed's witness. The rose, a symbol of love and betrayal.
Ship pulled from the harbor. New York's skyline faded into the mist. Poirot stood at the rail, his cane tapping softly. "Order is restored," he said, "but the heart of man remains a mystery." Hastings smiled. "You'll solve that one too, old chap." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Perhaps, mon ami. But for now, the grey cells rest." The sea stretched before them, vast and unyielding, like the truths Poirot had uncovered. The garden's secrets were silent at last, but their echoes lingered in his mind, a reminder that even in order, chaos whispered.